Hello YouTube and welcome to the next route learning video. On today's video we're going to be taking a look at the newly released Chatham Main Line, and I'm going to be driving one of several different journeys you can take on this add-on, this one being between Orpington and London Victoria. The scenario that I'm using is one that I've custom created specifically for this video, and follows the real-life timetable of train 2 Delta 28, which is the 8:16 AM Orpington to London Victoria service. I have set this scenario a few years ago so that I could use the standalone Class 465 and benefit from the Armstrong Powerhouse sound pack for it, rather than just using the Class 465 which comes with the Chatham Main Line. The total distance for this journey is just under 15 miles, and along the way we will be calling at Petts Wood, Bickley, Bromley South, Shortlands, Beckenham Junction, Kent House, West Dulwich, Herne Hill, Brixton, and finally London Victoria. I am making this scenario available on Steam Workshop, and you can find the link to the scenario on Workshop in the description of this video. However, I've got to say that due to the realistic nature of the traffic pattern with 37 AI trains in this 15-mile journey, as well as a wide variety of stock types, the DLC requirement to be able to play this scenario is quite high. Our attraction for the journey today is a Southeastern Class 465. Constructed between 1992 and 1994 by Brell, ABB and GEC Alstom, the first unit entered service on the 13th of October 1992. A total of 147 4-car units were produced in 3 subclasses. The units have a capacity of 348 people seated, with a lot more standing. The weight of each unit is 136 tonnes, and they operate on the 750-volt DC third rail system. The maximum speed is 75 miles per hour, and the power output of each unit is 1,608 horsepower. In the cab of the Class 465, the first thing to do to set up for departure is to put the reversing handle into the forward position, and then as you do this you need to reset the AWS self-test sequence. After doing this, I'm now just going to turn on the headlights by clicking on the headlight button just up here and dragging the button around. So I've just got to drag it around 90 degrees. It doesn't quite like to click into place, so sometimes it might just jump back slightly. And now that I've done that, the train is actually set up ready for departure. So let's just have a quick look at some of the cab controls here. Down here we've got the combined traction and brake controller, which has 4 steps of power and a standard Westcode 3-step brake. The indication at the side of the power handle appears to show that there are 7 steps of power, but I believe that this is due to parts of the cab being recycled from the older Class 166 Networker DMU, which came with the original rail simulator. With the brakes there are steps 1, 2 and 3, which is full service, and then finally the emergency position. Looking up now you can see the brake gauge just here, with the needle on the right being the brake cylinder pressure needle. When this is pointing at 0, then the brakes are released, and the higher it's pointing, then the harder the brakes are applied. If we now look to the middle of the cab, you can see the speedometer here measured in miles per hour, but unfortunately there are no markings to indicate any of the 5 mile per hour speed indications, only markings for every 10 miles per hour, which makes it slightly harder to judge your speed. On the right hand side just here we have the horn control, which is a 2-tone horn, controlled with the spacebar and the B key. Now that we've had a look around the cab, let's take a look at a couple more external shots of the train, and then we can depart out towards London Victoria. Departing from Orpington, the starting speed limit is 20 miles per hour, And at this point we've got around 1¼ miles to go to our first stop, which is Pettswood. As we've now reached 20 miles per hour, I've just idled the power to allow the train to coast. If we lose too much speed here, I will just give us 1 notch of power to bring us back up towards 20. But we shouldn't have a problem just here, as the speed limit will very shortly be going up to 70 miles per hour once we've joined the main line just here onto the upslope. I'd say I'm just going to give us a small amount of power, as we were losing just a bit too much speed there. We can accelerate up towards 70 miles per hour once we've crossed this point coming up just now. I'm now in full power, accelerating towards 70, however we certainly won't be able to get to 70 miles per hour before we've got to start thinking about braking for our stop. At this overbridge just here, we've then got 2/3 of a mile to go to Pettswood. As we're now reaching 55 miles per hour, I'm just going to bring the power handle back to the idle position now, just to allow the train to coast. I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop just as we pass this next signal coming up just here. So I've now made a step 2 brake application, which should bring our speed down quite nicely. Here at Pettswood station we do need to stop right at the other end of the platform, at the S side. As we entered the platform at 30 miles per hour there, I just reduced the braking to step 1, otherwise I knew we'd end up stopping a bit too quickly, and I've just released the brakes completely, just temporarily, before reapplying them now up towards step 2, back to step 1, and just sort of fanning the brakes now to bring us to a controlled stop by the S marker, which you can see just coming up on the right hand side now. We should now be stopped in about the right place. Departing Pettswood, the starting speed limit is 70 miles per hour, though it is very quickly going down to 30 miles per hour. And at this point we've got around 1¾ miles to go to our next stop, which is Bickley. I'm just going to accelerate a little bit above 30 miles per hour just here, up towards 35, and now I'm just going to pull the power handle back to idle. And I'm going to brake for the upcoming 30 mile per hour speed restriction just after we pass that signal just there. So I've now made a step 1 brake application, which should bring our speed down just about right. Our speed is now down to 30, and I'm just going to allow the train to coast along here. Just after crossing this junction to the right, we're then going to start on a downhill gradient as steep as 1 in 60. So I'm just going to have to use the brakes to control our speed down here. I'm just going to apply now step 1 of braking there, and now release the brakes, and that's just controlled our speed nicely. I don't think we're going to exceed the speed limit now, and as you probably just noticed, the speed limit has now gone up to 40 miles per hour, and we can now accelerate towards that. However, the 40 board was only 1/3 of a mile from an upcoming 30 mile per hour speed restriction, so I'm not going to accelerate too much, and in fact I'm just going to idle the power here and apply the brakes the moment I can see the 30 board, which I can now see it coming up just ahead. You could see it through the overbridge just here. I'm now back down to 30 miles per hour in time. I'm just going to allow the train to coast for a moment and then increase the power if I need to ensure that I don't lose too much speed. I've just given us notch 1 of power now, just to bring the speed back up slightly, as I felt there was too much speed being lost just there. We're now about to join the Chatham Main Line, and once we've joined the Chatham Main Line, the speed limit is going up to 60 miles per hour, and we can accelerate very shortly just at the speed post on the right hand side. You can see coming up is a small Morpeth board with a speed post below it, so I can now accelerate up towards 60 miles per hour. But do have to bear in mind that we are now travelling under adverse signals, so I do need to drive with extra caution. At the point where we could accelerate towards 60, we had 2/3 of a mile to go to our stop, and as we reach this next AWS ramp, we've got just under half a mile to go. I've now idled the power at this point, and I'm going to apply the brakes just as we reach the signal coming up. We are going down in 1 in 100 at this point, which will affect our ability to brake. And here at Bickley station, I need to aim to stop at the 4-car stop sign, which is around halfway along the platform. You can now see the 4-car sign just coming up on the left hand side by the video monitors there, so I'm just coming down just nicely for that. Should be stopping in just about the right place, and as I do stop, I'm just going to activate the driver reminder appliance due to the adverse signal ahead, so I've just clicked on that just now. Departing from Bickley, the starting speed limit is 60 miles per hour, and we've got just over 1 mile to go to the next stop, which is Bromley South. And just before departing from Bickley station there, I just checked what the signal aspect was ahead, and then deactivated the driver reminder appliance. But again, I do have to bear in mind here that I am driving under cautionary signals, and you must always bear that in mind at all times to try and avoid passing a signal at danger. We are still going down at 1 in 100, so I've got to be mindful of that when it comes to slowing down for our stop at Bromley South. And now that we've just reached 60 miles per hour, I've just idled the power to allow the train to coast at this point. At the signal coming up, we've then got half a mile to go to our stop, and I'm going to apply the brakes up to step 2, just as we've passed this signal. Our speed is now coming off quite nicely, and you can see the platforms at Bromley South coming up just ahead. I have just reduced the braking for a moment just because I felt we might be slowing down slightly too quickly. Here at Bromley South, I need to aim to stop at the S sign at the end of the platform. I'm just fanning the brakes here to try and bring us to a gentle stop, and you can now see the S sign coming up on the right hand side here. And so we should now be stopping in about the right place. Departing from Bromley South, the starting speed limit is again 60 miles per hour, and at this point we've got just over 3/4 of a mile to go to our next stop, which is Shortlands. Again, just before departure from Bromley South there, I checked what aspect the signal ahead was displaying and deactivated the driver reminder appliance. I do realise though that I remembered to activate it just after I'd ended the recording when stopping there, which is why you didn't see me turning on the driver reminder appliance in the first place. I'm going to idle the power here just at this next AWS ramp, and then I'm going to apply the brakes just as we come to this signal here. You can now see the platforms at Shortlands station coming up just ahead, and again at Shortlands I need to aim to stop at the S sign at the end of the platform. I do also need to come into the platform a bit slower than usual, because as you can see there I do have a red signal aspect ahead, so I do want to approach that slower than I would do if the signal was clear. So I'm aiming to enter the platform there no faster than 20 miles per hour, and then slowly crawl up towards the signal. You can now see the S sign just coming up on the right hand side. In fact, I'm going to stop slightly too early there. I'm just going to give it a tiny bit of power, then idle once again. And we should now be stopping in about the right place. Departing Shortlands, the starting speed limit is 60 miles per hour, and at this point we've got around 1 1/3 miles to go to our next stop, which is Beckenham Junction. At this point we're now passing, I believe it's Shortlands Junction, and so the line to London Victoria via Denmark Hill is now going to leave us to the right, and we will then meet it again just after Brixton station. At the next signal coming up, we've then got 3/4 of a mile to go to our stop at Beckenham Junction. We've now just started on a downward gradient of 1 in 95, so I do now need to bear that in mind. I've just idled the power at this point to try and ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit. I'm now going to apply the brakes for our stop as I can see the next signal ahead before the AWS ramp. So the moment I can see the AWS ramp for that signal, which I can now see it, I've now made an immediate step 2 brake application, which should hopefully bring our speed down about right. Here at Beckenham Junction, I'm aiming to stop at the 4-car stopping point, which is around halfway along the platform. And so we should now be stopping in about the right place. Departing Beckenham Junction, the starting speed limit is 60 miles per hour, and at this point we've got just over 3/4 of a mile to go to our next stop, which is Kent House. At the end of this platform we've then got around half a mile to go to an upcoming 40 mile per hour speed limit, and so I do need to bear that in mind. I'm going to idle the power as we reach 50 miles per hour along here. And then I'm going to brake for the 40 mile per hour speed limit which is coming up as I'm approaching the next signal. I have now just put the power into idle. And we're now approaching the next signal, so I've now put on the brakes for the upcoming 40 speed limit. Slowed down slightly too much there, just giving us a tiny bit of power. But you can now see Kent House Station is just coming up just ahead, and here I need to aim to stop at the forecast stop point, which is around 2/3 of the way along the platform. And so we should now be stopping in just about the right place. Departing Kent House, the starting speed limit is 40 miles per hour, and we've now got just over 2 3/4 miles to go to our next stop, which is West Dulwich. Unusually, for a busy commuter service which usually stops at all stations, we're actually missing out the next 2 stations according to the timetable, so we'll actually be going straight through Penge East and Sydenham Hill stations. The speed limit has now just gone back up to 60 miles per hour, so I'm accelerating up towards that now. Now that we've reached 60 miles per hour, I've just cut back on the power for a moment to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. We just passed through Penge East Station, and we've now got around a mile-long tunnel to pass through. I'm going to try and look up the name of this tunnel and see if I can caption it in the video, as I can't remember the name of this tunnel off the top of my head. There is a steep gradient entering the tunnel, so I'm just increasing the power for a moment, just to ensure we don't lose too much speed. And now the gradient has just leveled out a bit, so I'm now cutting the power back once again. And also keeping an eye on our speed, just to make sure we're not gaining or losing too much. Immediately as we leave this tunnel, we're then going to pass through Sydenham Hill Station, and at Sydenham Hill we've then got around 3/4 of a mile to go to our upcoming stop at West Dulwich. We're now passing through Sydenham Hill Station, and I'm going to apply the brakes for our stop just after the next signal, so not the one that we've just passed, but the green signal you can see coming up just ahead. I've now got the brakes on for our stop. And again here at West Dulwich we do need to stop at the S sign, which is at the end of the platform. I do now also need to take note that I've got a double yellow signal here, so as I stop here at this station I'm going to need to turn on the driver reminder appliance once again, just to remind me that I do have a cautionary signal when starting off again. And so we should now be stopped in about the right place. Departing West Dulwich, the starting speed limit is 60 miles per hour, and at this point we've got around 1 mile to go to our next stop, which is Herne Hill. Once again, I checked the signal before departing just there and then deactivated the driver reminder appliance, but I do now need to bear in mind that I am driving currently under a double yellow signal, and so do have to drive with more caution. So we've just got a single yellow there, which has just jumped up to a double yellow aspect. And I've decided to slow down to 45 miles per hour, as very shortly there will be a 45 mile per hour speed restriction, so I didn't really see much point in accelerating above that while under adverse signals here. And again, I've got a single yellow signal coming up just ahead. So I'm now preparing to stop at a potential red, but I do think the red signal's actually at the other end of the platform here and not at this end of the platform. So yes, it wasn't before the platform. I can now see that there are no signals just before here. So the signal is indeed right at the other end of the platform there. And here at Herne Hill station, I need to stop by the platform monitors at the end of the roof. It looks like there should be a 4-car stop marker there, but unfortunately one hasn't been put in. So it's just a bit of guesswork here, but it looks to me that the end of the roof should be about the right place to stop. And so I believe this should be the right stopping point now. And so we've now arrived at Herne Hill. Departing Herne Hill, the starting speed limit is 45 miles per hour, though very quickly going up to 60 miles per hour. And at this point, we've got around 3/4 of a mile to go to our next stop, which is Brixton. The line towards Elephant and Castle and London Blackfriars now diverges to the right-hand side. And at this point, the speed limit is now going up to 60 miles per hour. What I'm looking out for now is the next signal. At that point, we've then got half a mile to go to Brixton Station. And so I'm going to idle the power now, just approaching the signal at 50 miles per hour. And I'm just going to allow the train to coast for a moment. And now I'm going to start applying the brakes for our stop. At Brixton Station, I do need to stop at the S sign, which is at the end of the platform. Looks like I braked just slightly too early here. And also the speed limit is dropping to 45 miles per hour just before entering the platform, and won't go above 45 now between here and London Victoria. And so you can see the S sign just coming up now on the left-hand side. And if I can just stop next to that, then we should be stopped in about the right place. Departing from Brixton, the starting speed limit is 45 miles per hour, and at this point we've got just over 3 miles to go to our next and final stop, which is London Victoria. As we get towards 45 miles per hour, I am then going to idle the power to allow the train to coast, as in a moment we're going to start going downhill towards Clapham High Street and Wandsworth Road stations on a gradient of around 1 in 96, which will actually cause us to gain a little bit of speed. So we've just started on the downhill gradient now, and the power handle is in idle. I will now use the brakes along here if necessary to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. I just applied the brakes very slightly there for a brief moment just to ensure we didn't break the speed limit. We're now coming up on Clapham High Street station, and for a moment as we pass the station the gradient is going to level out before we start going downhill again just after on a 1 in 90 gradient towards Wandsworth Road station. We're now going downhill once again, so I just need to keep an eye on our speed here to ensure we don't break the speed limit. I'm just applying some slight braking there and now releasing around 43 miles per hour. The gradient has now levelled out again temporarily, and then in a moment we're going to start climbing on a steep upward gradient, as steep as 1 in 38. I've now applied some power just to try and prevent us from losing too much speed on this upward gradient. You can also see the gradient changing again just here, as the gradient is once again about to level out. I've now idled the power to allow the train to coast at this point. I'm just going to give us a tiny bit more power just to try and keep us at around 45 miles per hour. At the next signal, which is coming up in a moment, we've then got around a quarter of a mile to go to an upcoming 20 mile per hour speed restriction. Actually, I think it's the following signal, not this signal. So at the next signal the speed limit drops to 40, and at the following one after that, which is a quarter of a mile later, the speed limit will then be dropping to 20. At this point I'm just going to allow the train to coast, as I don't need to give us any more power at this point, especially as I can see that we do have some adverse signals approaching London Victoria. We're now crossing, I believe it's Battersea Pier, crossing the River Thames. And we now have a single yellow signal, which is just at the start of a 40 mile per hour speed zone, a quarter of a mile away from a 20 mile per hour speed zone, and also at the start of a 1 in 64 downward gradient. So I do have to be very careful just here not to allow the train to roll away with me, and also to remember that the brakes are less effective because of the steep downward gradients. I can now see that there is a red signal coming up just ahead, which applies to me at present. I do know that I do need to wait for another train to clear the area before I can drive into the platform here. And it may be the case that I have to request permission to pass the signal at danger once that train has cleared the area. Just trying to crawl up to the signal now, nice and slowly and gently. The gradient here has now levelled out, so the train shouldn't roll away with me anymore, and I can just control the speed a lot more easily at this point. And so now I've just got to stop at this signal and wait for the platform to clear. I'm now going to pan to a couple of outside shots of other trains passing, just because I think it looks a little bit more interesting than staring dead straight ahead at this point. And then once the signal has cleared, we'll then get back in the cab for the remainder of the journey into Victoria. Now that the train ahead has cleared our path, I'm now just going to request permission to pass the signal at danger, which has just been given to me. So it seems that unfortunately the signal won't clear, and you will have to request permission to pass this signal when you're driving the scenario for yourself. We're now coming up on a 15 mph speed restriction, so I've just idled the power. I'm just now going to apply some light braking just to ensure that I've slowed down to 15 in time. At this point I'm just allowing the train to coast, and I will give us a notch of power if required if I feel we're going to lose too much speed. But I'm just going to do that now, just quickly up to notch 1 of power, and now straight back into idle once again. So now coming into platform 3 at London Victoria Station. I'm going to now bring our speed down closer to 10 mph as we get closer to the end of the platform, and just gradually bring our speed down as we get towards the buffers. And I'm aiming to stop just after the buffer stops themselves have disappeared just below the window. And so here we are, arrival at London Victoria. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really do hope that you have enjoyed it. Please don't forget that for the latest channel updates you can find me on Facebook, and the link to my Facebook page is in the description of this video. And also please don't forget that you can find this scenario on Steam Workshop. Again, the link to the scenario on Workshop is also in the description of this video. Once again, thank you for watching.